Welcome to the Aperture PhotoBook Club. We are really happy to see so many people joining us at an unusual time, I might add, for the PhotoBook Club, 5 o'clock Eastern, 2 o'clock Pacific. If you are joining, I see already a lot of people are here. So if you want to share where you're tuning in from in the chat, it's always fascinating to see someone like Ed definitely has a reach beyond our average photo book club guest. So I bet there are people tuning in from interesting places all over. So please feel free to add that to the chat. And you also should feel free throughout the program to add any questions you might have to the Q&A, and we will do our very, very best to get to them. So I'm Sarah Meister. I'm the executive director of Aperture. Aperture is a 72-year-old photography nonprofit publisher. We started as a quarterly magazine, and beginning in the mid-60s, we started publishing books. We've published over 1,000 books to date. One of our most recent ones is Ed Templeton, Wires Crossed. And we are really thrilled to be talking about that here on the Photo Book Club. So the Photo Book Club was something we started because there's so much that goes into the creation of books like this. And we love them so much. We think of them as really an incredible expression of what photography can do and how you can live with it in your living room or studio or bedroom, as per me. And so we thought, let's invite some people into the conversation, and that's really what this is all about. I do also want to thank our sponsors who make this Photo Book Club possible. FotoFocus, based in Cincinnati, their biennial is coming up this fall, and so we're very grateful for their support. Thank you, FotoFocus, and thank you, RVCA. Don't be fooled that it is spelled RVCA if you are not in the skate world. That could throw you for a loop. But thank you also, RVCA, for your support of Wires Crossed, which helps make these books a reality. So I am going to briefly introduce my guests, and then I am also going to try as much as possible to get out of the way. As I said, these I have the privilege of getting to spend time with a lot of amazing artists, but never with a professional skateboarder who's also an artist. So there are huge swaths here where I just know my value added is limited, but that's where everyone else comes in. So we're here with Ed Templeton. Thank you, Ed. Oh, look, now I can see where everyone's tuning in from. Yay. Wow. Look at that. Spain. I love it. Italy, Brazil, Germany. Great. I think we had a little pause in the loading of that. So Ed Templeton is the artist and the creative mind behind this book. Tom Bollier is the production manager who really helped translate this into physical form. We're going to get all into that. And Gregg is our director of book sales and operations at Aperture, and was a driving force in helping bring this book to fruition, along with the wonderful Leslie Martin, who is now executive director of Printed Matter. But we do want to shout out to Leslie for all that she did to help bring this book into the world too. So we're going to show you, we like to begin with a little flip through of the book in case you're not sitting with it in your lap. And Ed, I would say, tell us what you're seeing, and this will give people an idea of the sort of physicality and the scale of the book. So take it away.
Thank you so much, Sarah. This is a little flip through the book, and I thought I could read a quote from one of my journals as this plays through. So this is a quote from 1998. I picked up a camera to remember my youth as a skateboarder, which started disappearing the very millisecond I could fathom I was mired in it. Playing the roles of both observer and participant, I wanted to document the extraordinary things I was able to do and the people I was doing them with. We traveled the world using public and private infrastructure in ways nobody intended on our skateboards, in constant conflict with security guards, police, and a litigious society. We felt like outlaws operating outside of the social order, getting away with what we could as we toured across nations, searching for skate spots, validation, and cheap thrills. I tried to record what this lifestyle was like on film, shooting both the triumphs and disasters, the blood and the boredom, the self-medication, the effects of fame, the lust, and the endless marginal moments. What haunts me is how much I missed. That's something that kills me to this day, how much I feel like I failed in my mission of documenting skateboarding. It's such a just a crazy world that even looking at this book for how much I did get, it just makes me think of how much I missed as well. All the crazy moments I missed, all the interesting things that happened that I wasn't able to get my camera out in time to capture.
Well, I will say for somebody who's totally unfamiliar with this world, you captured a lot. So for, I look through it with sort of a sense of like, wow, really? And I love the journal entries too, because it really, I don't know, it anchors it in your voice, which I think is also, and not just your vision. Maybe we'll start by just with the title, right? Wires crossed. How did you get to that? What does that signify for you?
I think it was a way to describe skateboarders as being slightly psychopathic in some ways. For me, it meant that every person I know who is a skateboarder has a wire crossed in their brain, is kind of what it meant. Um, that kind of personality that is able to throw themselves down a set of stairs 50 times, uh, get bloody, you're falling on asphalt, obviously. So people get really thrashed and they keep doing it out of the love for landing that trick. So uh, yeah, that's kind of what it was. And even from the early days, I was always going to call it that. I probably should have renamed it just the skateboarders or something like that, like the Americans or something like that. But I just stuck
I
to wires crossed.
I love Wired Cross because I think it also, it evokes to me, not having ever thrown myself down any flights of stairs or anything, or not intentionally at least. It's like a moment of calibrating different responses to a place or thing. So like, let's not cross wires. Let's sort of so to me, it evokes also a kind of interpersonal, um, check-in, like how are you, where are you, let's not cross wires. So, but obviously I'm not a skater. So, but will you to also talk a little bit about photography? In other words, not your mix of, bring us back to when you were young and where the competing impulses to skate and make pictures came from.
Yeah, certainly. So part of that missing feeling was that I turned pro when I was 18 years old at 1990, turned pro, and I didn't really pick up a camera in earnest until 1994. So there was that 4 years where I also just was not documenting this lifestyle I got to live. And so that epiphany came around 1994. I had suddenly become exposed to photo books in the photo book world. I often cite seeing Nan Goldin's The Ballad of Sexual Dependency and Larry Clark's Tulsa and Teenage Lust around the same time as a real eye-opening experience for me. Seeing those photo books for me was an example of, here are two photographers. Like up until this point, I had probably thought photography was like National Geographic style, or go document a war.
We work against that every day, but okay, good. It's
Oh, but
common.
I was young, and I was around photographers,
Yeah.
being a pro skateboarder who their job was to shoot me for the magazine. So I was kind of surrounded by camera culture a lot. And but yeah, I think seeing those books really put me in a different world. And the example I took was that those two, Larry Clark and Nan Goldin, were both documenting their own friends. It was their circle. They were documenting their scene. That was like slapped me in the face as an example of look at the life I get to live. I get paid to do the exact thing I would be doing if I wasn't getting paid, skateboarding, which is what I love. And here I am getting paid to do it. I'm a professional. I get to travel the world. And so I was kind of surrounded by all these kids living rock star lives, traveling the world and, being famous in our little microcosm.
It's a pretty
And
big microcosm, but yes.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I say that because it's like we're not famous in the walking down the street sort
Right.
of.
I confess, I didn't know your name until Richard told me about you. So there you go.
Yeah, so yeah, you
For
wouldn't
what
know
that's
me
worth.
walking down the street, but we walk by a skate spot and the kids are gonna freak out because they know who we are. They've seen us in videos and magazines their whole life. So we have a fame and a sort of on a certain level. And watching the people around me use that fame to their advantage was also one of the aspects of what I wanted to document. So yeah, it was around that time when I realized I should be shooting this lifestyle. Who gets to live this? And I'm in I'm in the catbird seat. Like I'm in the spot where I'm an insider already. This isn't someone who decided skateboarding looked cool. I'm going to try to weasel my way into skate culture and document it. I was already sitting inside of it.
So you had something, you may not have known how to work a camera, but you had something that the professional photographers couldn't have had because
I
you
had
were, yeah.
crazy access. Yeah. I mean, by default, I had access. So yeah, I started learning photography. All my skate photographer friends taught me tons of stuff. A guy like Mickey Vukovic, who's a famous photographer for Transworld Skateboard magazine back in the time, sat me down and taught me what an aperture was and um, what a shutter speed was and what they did, and so I started just picking it up and learning by default. I never went to college uh, or art school for any of this stuff, so I started learning by trial and error, making big mistakes and ruining whole rolls of film and whatnot. And like when those things happen enough, you get so pissed that you make yourself get better and learn how not to make those mistakes again.
Richard, maybe we'll bring you in and just sort of, what was it that made you think this ought to be an Aperture book? In other words, it's not, I mean, we did publish Nan Goldin's Ballad of Sexual Dependency, but what was it that you saw that made you so sure?
Well, it's an interesting story because I met Ed probably in 2016, and I had already heard from Kelly McLaughlin and Leslie Martin, our colleagues at Aperture, that they had already talked to Ed about this a couple of years before that. And so it was one of these things where when I met Ed, and I knew your name before I met you, Ed. So
and by the way, Kelly
yeah.
is listening in. She just said hi, Ed. So,
Oh, yeah, but I when Ed first talked to me about it, I think it was in LA where I bumped into you somewhere, and you started telling me that you were, kind of sitting on this project and waiting for the right time and kind of pulling it together in your head. And so, I mean, I was immediately fascinated just for all the reasons you've talked about, connections to kind of that Larry Clark or Nan Golden and subcultures, and it was immediately also you're so kind and forthcoming and nice to talk to, so that made it easy as well to want to work with you. But the work, I mean, as we started to see it, I know Leslie was immediately taken by it, and and Tom as well, as he started to see it. I mean, the project really came together in such cool ways that we knew there would be, a market for it. I'm also part of that market, I guess, being a middle-aged man who rode a skateboard, 35 years ago or 30 years ago. So I understand that as well, and kind of wanted to see this work. But we knew that, from a sales perspective, we knew that, this book would be something that we could really get out there and would reach a lot of people. And I knew too, from a, kind of sales and marketing perspective, that it'd be fun to launch a book with you because you spent your entire life as, or at least since 1994, I guess when Toy Machine started, you've spent your life selling and being a marketing, director of sorts. It's kind of interesting. And just kind of going back to the photography, I was just thinking about this as we were talking about your eye, how great it is, and how that developed. Do you think there's a connection between, a deck and how, an illustration on a deck, which you've been doing for years, how that's
Oh,
framed
can you
by,
say what you mean by that? Because I actually,
a
you don't
skateboard.
mean, right, okay.
Yeah,
Just
a
to be clear,
skateboard.
not
Okay.
everybody, some people say deck and they think some sort of promotional.
But there's
Okay.
an illustration on a deck for a professional skater is framed by the deck itself, much like a photograph is framed. Do you think your eye was kind of honed by kind of the connections between those two, or can you maybe speak to that, how your eye developed?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think as much as like a graphic necessarily.
Yeah,
Deanna, my wife, will often say that she thinks that my skateboarding has influenced the way I shoot,
sure.
because she kind of sees me like a shark when I'm out in the street, darting from spot to spot and looking, like 50 feet ahead of me, getting ready to focus, or
On
figuring
your
out
feet, not on a skateboard, but with your
on my
camera in
on
your
my
hand?
on my feet. Yeah, not skateboarding, but
Do you
she
still
says
skate?
that I still skate a little bit, yeah, here and there, but not so much, not as much as I used to. So she says that she thinks street skateboarding has helped street photography. She notices the parallels between that.
Sure.
And like you said, I had been doing a skateboard company. I started Toy Machine in 1993, Toy Machine blood-sucking skateboard company, and have been doing the advertisements and doing the graphic design for the decks and everything like that. So um, as a photographer, when I started getting to the point, which there was many years in between there, but when I started publishing books, um, I've always been really hands-on as far as the book making is concerned. I've done all my own layouts. I lay out the book because I started doing skate advertisements in Thrasher magazine. So I know layout and that kind of stuff. So I've always kind of been on the back end as well as the front end. A lot of my friends are photo book publishers now. You have Clint Eastwood Clint Eastwood.
Like, isn't he
Woodside.
I think I've heard of him.
Wish I knew Clint Eastwood. Clint Woodside from Deadbeat Club, and Chris Pickler from Nazarelli are friends of
Yeah,
mine. So I've just always been on the
great
backside.
publisher.
Yeah, so yeah, like you said, marketing, and it's like I love promoting stuff. And people are probably really annoyed by my Instagram, how much I promote Wires
Not at
Cross.
all.
I love your Instagram. Great
Yeah.
plug. Can you make, we have some interesting sort of behind the scenes views of like how these things come together through you. Should we pull them up? Or I should say, Tom, I hope you chime in at any point, but is there something
Yeah, sure.
yeah.
I mean, I think it'd be great to see how the content of the book was drawn from Ed's archives and from his journals. In some cases, like very closely from something that he wrote, 25 years ago. So if we could pull that up, that'd be great.
These are some examples of some of my sketchbooks. Some of these were not in the book, but just to show what I was doing when I was on skateboard tours. So, as a skateboarder, most of your life is spent traveling around from spot to spot doing skateboard tours. And as there is some examples where, some of the text in the book made it into on the photographs themselves and into the book. Just some examples of how that goes together. This is the original page.
Wait, can you go back one page to see that? So this is the original page. And then you're saying, so somebody's highlighting.
And there it is in the book. I sort of
yeah.
so I literally scanned that right out of the book and then sort of photoshopped the text around it off so I could have it in there looking like photo corners.
Very cool.
Which is, something to talk about as far as the construction of this book goes, is that I think from the beginning I had probably thought of it as a standard photo book. I wanted to tell the story through photos alone, not using text, not using interviews, not doing anything like that. Just photos in a sequence was my original plan. But through talking with Richard and Leslie, they really put such importance on contextualizing this work, which I might have resisted at the beginning, but quickly realized that they're completely right. It needs to be contextualized. It's sort of a time capsule from a different era. And a lot of us have evolved since that time. And so some of the subject matter in the book is a little thorny. So I think context is really important. And then the journals and the sketchbooks, I mean, I really started only going into my journals because I needed to find dates. I have a really good system of finding my negatives. I have my negatives pretty well organized, but I don't have a lot of everything's not super dated. It's more just like number, proof number 1, proof number 2. And I've been retroactively trying to date everything as I go. But there was situations where I was like, I don't know where this was, exactly what city I was in or what date this was. So I would go into my sketchbook and find, okay, and I was in Tulsa in 1998. And then I was as to find the date. Then I was realizing that in some instances I wrote about the actual photo I shot in my book. And then it hit me like, okay, I need to go through all my books now on top of like the photos that I had selected. I need to go through all my sketchbooks and find little bits and pieces. And then from there, it was a quick transition into just, you know what, I'm scanning stuff directly out of my sketchbooks to put in the book as is. And, working with Tom, and we can talk about how that's done. I mean,
yeah, let's talk about that, because that's not
Mhm.
something that's in a lot of our Aperture books. How was that for you, Tom?
It was pretty complex. I mean, the layout for this book, which Ed set up himself, probably it was an InDesign. It probably had 800 links or something to different text pieces and different images, and it was like a pretty over the top maximalist layout. But I think our goal was kind of to stay faithful to the original material, to the notebooks and to his original prints, while also touching things up and improving things to make them work well together. It's a cohesive book. And so I met with Ed a bunch of times and looked at all of his prints. And I mean, he has, if it's not clear from the shelves behind him, has a massive archive of material that this was drawn from. And so that process alone, I mean, I wasn't involved during that whole editing process, but was years and years of culling images and finding prints and finding journal entries and all that. So there's a kind of massive amount of like research and archival, digging that went into making the book too.
Do you want to describe that a little more, Ed? Like, what was that
Yeah.
like?
Yeah, so I think I've been telling people that I had about 5,000 photos. I checked the other day just to be sure. It's actually only 4,250 photos was what I went through. I went through all my archive. I think I was telling you guys before that, I had done a book, one of my past books, Teenage Kissers. I did it kind of fast. And when here's my sequencing board in my office there. This is how I was sequencing the book, essentially looking at this cork board and printing out new pages constantly and changing things around. I think the cork board is an incredible way to see the whole book in one glance. So I could see what things were too close to each other, how to spread some of the color versus black and white, how to spread the maps out. I worked with Leslie really closely on that. She was very hands-off with most things about the book, but she did impose a few rules. I remember at one point she said, we have to lose 8 pages, 8 spreads, which made me panic for a second. But having the corkboard like this was really easy to lose 8 pages or 8 spreads, really 16 pages ultimately.
Is this where you're sitting now? Like, are you looking up at the cork board that?
No, it's in the room
Okay.
next door. We don't have kids, so all our rooms are offices and photo storage and stuff like that. So yeah, that's in the next room over. But yeah, it was really easy to be able. This is the dark room where I printed a lot of the photos for the book, because that's another aspect of the photos, is like some of the photos have decoration on the prints. So in those cases, I need to print the photo right on the print and then use my flatbed scanner to scan it for the book, and then do Photoshop work to make the background white and everything.
Do you want to also just explain? I mean, I think we have enough young people who tune into the PhotoBook Club that, like, there may be people who have on their iPhone camera roll more than 4,200 pictures, because that's just, in other words, that is, do you want to talk a little bit more about like what kind of space and time is implied by that when you're talking about an analog era?
Yeah. Well, I can show you this. I have this. This this is my photo archive.
That's a lot of space.
So, and I'm
Are those
running.
like 3-ring binders, kind of?
Yeah, each one of these is a big 3-inch 3-ring binder, and each one of these holds about 75 rolls, 75 rolls of proof sheets. And so I did like this systematic search, and in 2012 I broke my leg and decided to retire as a professional skateboarder, and that made a natural starting point for like, let's start really getting this together. I had been playing with layouts for decades actually, and had a lot of plans and things, but I think 2012 was when I really was like, okay, it's go time. I need to do this. And so I had made a checklist, and I went through every book physically. Even though I have digitally archived, everything you see there in this is also digitally archived, because every time I get a proof sheet back from the lab, I also flatbed scan it and separate every single photo with a number.
You're an archivist's dream, by the way. So,
I take it seriously because so many of my friends have all of their work in, a Tupperware box or something like that, and they claim to know where everything is. They say like, oh, I have this photo, I have that photo, and then when you ask them to find it, they can't find it. So in a way, you don't have it. Even if you think you have it, you don't have it unless you can actually find it. So, so I'll make a book by using when I scan the proof sheets, I scan, the proof sheet is so small, it's like an inch big. So I'm scanning that to a 10-inch at 72 DPI little JPEG. And I'll lay out the whole book in low res. So like in the early phases of that corkboard, all the images look really murky and blurry because I'm working on with these really crappy low res JPEGs. But it's also a way to be more efficient. I can use these little super low res things, get a sequence going, get it figured out. So when it comes time to pull the negatives and get scans done, I'm only pulling what's needed.
all right.
And so yeah, let's go back to the editing process though. So, I went.
Yeah, and actually one thing maybe we could do while we're talking about the editing is like, let's pull up, we have the opening sequence kind of primed. So maybe we'll go through that, and would that help you would help illustrate what you mean when you're talking about the editing, or make it a little more concrete for people?
I was just kind of saying that having the digital archive and going through book by book, I ultimately came down to 4,250 photos is what I was saying.
Oh,
which isn't a huge number really.
No,
I mean,
it's not. I mean,
some people, yeah, you might think it's like thousands and thousands, but it was really 4,250 photos that I would consider potentially in this book. These are photos of skateboarders. And so it turns out I wasn't shooting as much as people might think. I would come back from a trip and only have 5 rolls of film or 8 rolls of film from a month-long skate tour. So I wasn't really shooting all the time. People always ask, were you imposing on other people? Were you annoying people with your camera all the time? And it's like, really, the camera was just sitting between my legs most of the time as I drove, and I wasn't shooting photos of people all the time. It was really very selective in a lot of ways. So yeah, when I had that 4,000, my process is I take that folder of 4,250, I copy the whole thing, and then I go through and the first task is get that to 2,000 photos essentially. So, and this might take months and months to do. I'll go down and get it to 2,000, then I'll take some time off and step away from it, and come back in a couple months and then start doing it again. And so each level is like, now I need to cut it to 1,000. And I spoke with people over the time. I remember interviewing Jim Goldberg.
Well, actually, it's interesting. One of the questions that came in from the audience was, they asked, what kind of an influence would you say Jim Goldberg has had on your work and on your bookmaking? So that's it.
Oh yeah, I mean, a huge influence. Raised by Wolves is, I cite the example of Nan Golden and Larry Clark in the way I shot this book, but the way I put this book together would, I say, definitely come from, and even the fact that I write on the photos, you can kind of, it harkens to Allen Ginsberg's photographs, late Robert Frank, and Robert Frank obviously influenced Jim Goldberg, who then in turn influenced me. And so, yeah, the idea of taking an image and adding that little sentence that gives it a little extra context, even if it's just a date and a name and a place, it really gives people a context that's really interesting. And sometimes a whole paragraph might really help add context to it, so the viewer understands where I'm coming from when I write a story on a photograph.
And can I just ask a sort of like a very mundane question, but you happen to have amazing handwriting. And I'm just wondering, like, how conscious were you of your handwriting? Like because I presume this was your handwriting when you were a teenager too, or something, I mean, I like Richard, but I don't think Richard's handwriting is as good as yours. Sorry, Richard.
I just think handwriting, cursive is really beautiful, and nobody does it anymore. I'm learning. I'm in doing the Wires Cross exhibition. I was learning from teachers that saw the show that they don't teach cursive anymore, and that for a lot of the kids seeing the show, this might be basically hieroglyphics to them, not being able to even read it, which is kind of a funny way. So maybe it's only for old people can read this stuff. But I just like the way it looks. Yeah, I mean, you see that in those Allen Ginsberg photographs a lot, that cursive writing too. I always just like the way it looks. It's more poetic than my sort of chicken scratch block letters that is how I normally write. I mean, I think you saw some in some of the examples of the sketchbooks, but my sketchbook writing is like really tiny.
Yeah, but legible still.
Yeah,
barely legible.
Maybe Tom, do you want to talk about, like, because there's special things that come into when you're trying to reproduce handwriting as opposed to text, printed text in a book?
Well, I think we definitely wanted it to look like it was actual pen, on the paper. And if it were printed with just one ink, it would look, usually you would print text like typeset text with just black ink. But in this case, we printed it with multiple inks, so it would look richer and kind of glossier. But I think the bigger challenge in reproducing Ed's work was reproducing the huge range of it, a lot of which is sort of handmade objects. Like if anyone saw the Wires Cross show in Long Beach or in the Netherlands, you see that like the original prints are all, for the most part, they're prints that Ed's made in the darkroom, gel and silver prints. And there are quite a few that are drawn or painted on, like with brightly colored paint. And to reproduce all that in a book in a cohesive way that sort of honors the original objects was sort of the main goal in the printing process. And just to go into some lightly technical stuff about printing, the standard for printing presses is they print with 4 inks: cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. So cyan's like a blue, then magenta, yellow, and the black kind of provides extra density and contrast. And so, all the images in this book were printed standard CMYK. But there's so many black and white images in the book, and you can successfully print black and white images with CMYK using the colored inks. As long as all the color inks are in the exact same ratio, they cancel each other out and become neutral. But the risk with that is, across a huge book like this with hundreds of images, if one of those colored inks in one of those black and white photographs becomes even slightly out of balance, then your black and white photograph has a tint to it. If it has too much magenta, it could look like kind of pinkish, or too much magenta and too much yellow, it might look kind of sepia. And it's just not consistent. And so for the black and white images, we decided to print them what's called duotone, which is where you print with black ink and a gray ink, which is the normal way to print black and white photographs. Many Aperture books now and in the past have printed that way, or with 3 black ink and 2 gray inks, a tritone. But the challenge with this book is there's so many prints that Ed has they're gelatin silver prints, so black and white, but he's painted on them in color. And in order to have those images appear like they're, from the same body of work as the other black and white images that have no color on them, we decided to print those images as a mixture of duotone and CMYK. So the black and white part is duotone and the color part is CMYK. So I'll grab a spread or something.
Yeah.
So or if we pull up one on the screen too, like this image, for example, the foreground or the bottom of the image is black and white. And we wanted that to look the same as the black and white images that run across from it. And if this whole image had printed CMYK, the black and white part would look pretty different than the black and white images facing it. So right now, the way it's printed, this part on the bottom is just black and gray ink. This part up here is it's CMYK. And so that was just a bunch of, masking in Photoshop and selecting just the pixels that should be black and white to be with those two inks, and just the parts that are colored to be in CMYK, which was something we had to watch really closely when it was printing.
I bet.
Yeah. So maybe if we want to pull up, yeah, go ahead.
I just was saying, like, I know when I was presenting Tom with a crazy sort of project when this came to him, and so I hope people appreciate what he's saying. I mean, we're talking about the same piece of paper went through the press twice, right, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, it was partly a limit. So this book printed at a printer in Singapore, a very small but very good printer called
Let's shout them out.
Pristone.
Yeah.
Yeah, Pristone is great. It's it's tiny. It's maybe, I don't even know, maybe 12 employees. And it was a printer that was around for a while, like in the 90s and early 2000s, under a different name. And then the owner died, and his son relaunched the company with many of the same employees who, had 30, 40 years of experience, like really, really skilled printing people. And so this is, this is pictures from being on press there.
And maybe people don't even realize that you often travel, especially for complex books like this, on
press. I mean, someone from Aperture, for some of the larger or more complicated books, someone will go, myself or Andrea or Minji, my colleagues, or someone freelance will go on press. It's basically a way of ensuring quality control, that there's not an issue that comes out when you receive the printed sheets of the book that you could have avoided. And especially when there's deadlines and you need the book soon, it's a way of making sure things go smoothly. So as you see in these pictures, the book prints in big sheets that are then folded down into signatures, in this case, 16-page signatures. And so you have images running across from each other, or it's called running in line with each other. So if say one of the images, that color image of Carrie Getz in a Japanese spa on the bottom right there, if that image were say too red and there was a color image running across from it that needed more red, you would have to find a equilibrium between the two, because adjusting the ink on one of them affects the other one. So it's sort of like this complex puzzle of balancing everything to look how you want it to, and not sacrificing too much quality on other images if one thing needs an adjustment. But Ed, back to what you were saying about going through the press twice. So Pristone has a printing press that it has it's called 4 units in it, so it can print 4 inks at a time. Some other printers have printers with 6 or 8 units, but for complex reasons, we needed to print this project at Pristone, which only had a 4-color press. So that meant we had to run the CMYK parts as one pass, and then a second pass for the duotone images and the varnish that goes on top of the images. So the press operators are very skilled at making sure everything stays aligned, and it's amazing how precise
it is.
These presses
Absolutely amazing. If you think that every one of those piles represents a sheet that went through the printers separately,
it's amazing.
More than once. Yeah.
That's what I was blown away about. Like, when Tom kind of came up with this like workaround to having all, because I sent him this, like you said, the file is crazy when you see it, with all the different files are kind of overlapping each other with text images and images, and some of those pages are just very collaged. And I'm sitting there having fun making it, and then Tom comes in and sees it and goes like, "Oh my God, like how are we going to do this?" But he really figured out how to like he said, keep it true to what I had done, which is amazing. And the fact that he's cutting out, in one single spread, like some of these collage pages, which I made physical collages and scanned them, and he's cutting out the color versus. No, I can't find one, of course.
Well, here we can,
like,
there, yeah.
Something like
Yeah.
this. It's like, this is in this single spread. I mean, all these color bits are separate. And then the black and whites are separate, and he had to make sure those aligned every time the paper went through twice. If anyone's familiar with silk screening, of course, like the registration. So
Yeah,
that
that's
was
pretty amazing. Yeah,
just amazing. Like
this is not an everyday. So that was partly why we were so excited to talk about it. One of the other things that's unusual about this book, and Richard, maybe I'll pull you in to talk about this, is working with our colleague Karina Eckmeyer, and because as Leslie Martin always says, the book isn't finished until it's in someone's hands, until it's connecting with its audience. No one wants to, as great as those stacks of paper look, and as great as they look when they're bound into a book, until somebody's holding it, it hasn't sort of finished its journey. And you all had some really creative ideas about how to launch this book. Richard, you want to talk
Sure,
about that a
yeah.
little bit? Because I think, just like the production, it's we don't end up talking about that much, but since we have you and Tom on,
Sure. No, this was the very exciting part about this process, was working with Ed on the launch, and kind of back to what I said earlier about how Ed has launched or dropped products his entire career. I knew he'd be game for something interesting. And so what we did was we kind of started talking about how do we make something special, but reach a very wide audience with it, not just something that only goes through, Aperture only and reaches 50 people, but how do we make something that's,
we try
connected
to
to the
reach
book?
more than 50 even.
Oh, no, I
Aperture.
mean, with the special product that's connected
Okay.
to it. So what we did was we decided to create something that was, connected to skateboarding. And so what we went with was stickers. We went with a plan to create a bunch of stickers. And I want to shout out Nilo and Matt Barker at Toy Machine 2, who helped kind of support this, along with Karina and at Aperture, on making these. But you can see here, thank you. You can see here the stickers we made. And so if you look, I guess it's the Aperture sticker right in the center. We decided to make stickers that would kind of connect with a lot of retailers who sell books, and kind of connect to Ed, and have sold books of his in the past. And so we looked at bookstores we wanted to work with, and contacted them and got their kind of buy-in on it. And essentially what we did was we made stickers for every store. We gave these to every store. They put them in, and we all launched, every store launched at the same time, kind of a stickered edition of the Ed Templeton Wires Crossbook. And so these sold out almost immediately, and it was about 100 stickers for every store. So it was a really, fast moving kind of launch, especially for us. We usually don't reach that many people immediately, with those numbers. So it was really kind of fascinating to see this roll out. But Ed, if you want to talk about this, Ed did illustrations for every store, which was very generous. Do you want to talk about the process of making these stickers, or at least the illustrations, and how they connect to your work?
Yeah, it was fun. I mean, this is these stickers are sort of a perfect melding of my fine art practice, I suppose, because I do a lot of these profile drawings or faces in this sort of style with a dipping pen and colored ink, and also the skateboard graphics I make, obviously, all the time. So I just sort of took each shop and found some things that connected them. Obviously, Park Life has the Golden Gate Bridge on it, and Dashwood has sort of a city scene because it's New York City, and there's like Eiffel Tower for Yvon Lambert in Paris. And,
the Hollywood sign for Arcana books.
Yeah,
was really
Arcana
great.
has a Hollywood sign.
Really
and, so it's like sort of a lot of ways just like typical city the first thing you think about when you think of a city. Milan, for me, camera, that's like the sort of the seal of the city is this serpent eating a guy, which I connected to. And so yeah, it was fun making that artwork for this, and going through the process that we normally would for a skateboard sticker for my company. We just made sort of a new batch that instead of being for skateboards was for books. So in a lot of ways, yeah. Oh, yeah,
I just want to interrupt because there was a great question from the audience that was about your gallery exhibitions. And the question was this, that your photographs often sit alongside your paintings and drawings and wall paintings as an installation. So could you talk a little bit more about that connection between drawings and paintings and photographs in other contexts as well, in exhibition contexts as well?
Yeah, normally I don't like the barriers that people self-impose on themselves. If a gallerist comes to me and says, "Hey, we want to do an Ed Templeton show," and there's just go for it. It's probably going to be a mixture of paintings and photographs because I paint as well, and I make drawings and I shoot photos with equal zeal, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
And, so I'll do that. But I'm also open to having some rules placed on me because I'm a little bit of a megalomaniac as far as you can see the collection and the layout and all this stuff.
Just organized.
It's like I sometimes invite someone coming to me and say, "Hey, we want to do just a photo show." That gives me a nice parameter to work within. It's like it makes it easier for me. Like, okay, I'll just like let's figure out a photo thing. Sometimes a gallerist will come and say, "Let's do a painting only show," which I take as a big challenge because I'm a lot slower with painting than other things. So yeah, I just like those hierarchies to be gone. And like I said, when I was conceiving of this book, it was going to be just a photo book, just photos. And especially through Leslie really pushing me to put it in context, that's when we added the interviews. And I think that opened up the floodgates for putting the sketchbook journal entries in as is. And, you know, because we talked about it, I touched on it a little bit before. I mean, you know, some of this stuff a lot of this work was made before cell phones became prevalent, I guess. 2010 is when people started really carrying around cell phones all the time. And so most of this work was made before that. And so boredom is one of the huge themes in the books. It's like mostly skaters were just bored in tour vans. And that's what I ended up documenting. So, and the thrills and that they were trying to get, and that's how we sort of organized the book, was through different themes. Lust, boredom, security guards versus police, security guards and police versus skateboarders, the injuries, of course. All these different things were themes. I think I got cut off before. I was talking about like Jim Goldberg, his advice. He gave me some advice about how to edit. He took his characters and made edits based on characters. So he had like, a Tweaky Dave pile, which is a character from Raised by Wolves, and would take the best of Tweaky Dave and make the edit. And I tried to do that, but it didn't work for me that well because there's just so many photos of certain people in the book, Alyssa Steamer and Eric Ellington and Brian Anderson, that I couldn't just take the top 4 of each person because a lot of things they did throughout the arc of the story was so different too. So I don't know how many, I forgot to count how many Alyssa photos there are, but there's like a ton of photos of Alyssa Steamer because she was also so photogenic and is the kind of person that existed in front of the camera with complete comfort. I'm the kind of person that freezes up when the camera comes out. I get a little stiff. And her and Eric Ellington both are the kind of people that they don't care that the camera's there. They just keep doing exactly what they were doing, which is as a photographer, that's what you want the most, is just them to exist. That's what I'm trying to shoot, is what their life was like.
Well, actually, there are a couple of other questions that I want to get to that people ask. And the first one actually connects a lot to that because it's talking about flow, insider, outsider. So this is a question from Carl. It says, skateboarding has stereotypically looked down on outsiders within the culture. I suppose not just police and security guards, but maybe others as well. How was it working on a project where the appeal to skaters would always be there, but also thinking of a wider audience beyond the world of skateboarding? So he asked, did you curate the book with both audiences in mind, and did it influence your decisions on what to include?
100% it did. I would actually almost say that I kind of felt that the skateboard audience was almost built in already. I knew that my peers and the people who skate would appreciate this work.
Yeah, you had to
because-
persuade me.
Exactly. I mean, no, exactly. I mean,
By the way, it's true. It's a harder sell. You're right.
I'm a photographer that, you know, this work is so, I don't know how to explain it. I mean, I've done a lot of books before this book that don't have anything to do with skateboarding. So I'm a fan of photography and photo museums and photo books. I have a massive photo book collection, and so that was what I was going for in a way. I knew the skateboarders would like it. I knew my friends would like it. Even from the beginning when I started, I thought this is an export. This is an export thing. This is I'm gonna show this. I want to show the world what it's like to be a skateboarder. That's the question I asked myself when I made the book. This is a really important editing and bookmaking piece of advice I got from somebody, I think. I can't remember who it was. Maybe it was Jim. He said, you know, you have to ask yourself a question. What are you trying to say? What are you doing? And so in answering that question, it kind of dictates everything you do after the fact. And so I guess what I was trying to ask myself was, what is it like? How can I tell the guy sitting next to me on an airplane who doesn't know anything about skateboarding what it's like to be a pro skateboarder, what it's like to be a skateboarder in this time period? I mean, that's a general question, but that was my question, is like, how can I tell this story of us to other people?
Yeah.
But as a photography fan, I had to hold myself up to the standards of all the greats. You know, I'm looking at all the greats and comparing my work to these great people and trying to do that. I didn't want to rely on the fact that a skateboarder is going to know who that person is in the photo. It had to be a good photo on its own 2 feet without the person knowing anything about the culture or the person who's in the photograph. And so I was really careful actually to not fall into that trap. It's really easy for me to think this is a great photo because I know who this guy is and I know what he did, and there's a built-in baggage there that, you know, someone like you, Sarah, might not have any idea who he is. So it has to work as a photograph first.
Yep.
So that was really important to me, yeah, to make sure that the photo world would be interested in it. I kind of knew they would, because it's like, I mean, that's my favorite kind of work, is when an insider gets access to a culture
Right, it's like you don't.
that you don't normally get to get
I will
inside
say,
of.
I gave it to my 18-year-old son for his 18th birthday. He's not a skater, and he also loved it, because I think it really does, like, it, you know, it captures a feeling of this like vital subculture, and it feels very vital, you know. And that's conveyed through the photographs for sure. They are like a, you know, compelling to look at. But then the vibe of the book, you know, it's magnetic. So you know, it's got a great pacing and sequence, and it does pull you along. But we're getting close, and I know.
Can I
Oh yeah,
follow up
please.
with
That's what I
Carl's
was going to
question
say.
quickly?
Yeah.
Because we referenced the 2 exhibitions that opened with this, with the Bonafountain in the Netherlands and the Long Beach Art Museum in Long Beach. Those were installed after the book was already edited and, you know, on press or off of press. How did that, you know, just thinking about Carl's question about audience, how did, you know, curating or installing that show differ from the edit, you know, your corkboard edit for the book, and how did the book influence maybe the way you installed the show?
The book came first. I had been working on the book well before the shows were. I mean, I knew the shows were coming, but the book was the most important thing to like hit that deadline and get the book out. I think we had some special copies shipped to the Netherlands. The first ones that were ever seen were seen in Maastricht, straight from the printer. And so, having gone through that gauntlet of figuring out the themes and the sequencing and the context and all that stuff, that's where the hard work was for me. And that's what dictated the show as well. So, I mean, I basically took the book as my roadmap for what to print for the show, and in some ways how to present it. There's a lot of divergent things. There's way more injury photos in the exhibition than there are in the book, because I had to only, pick. I mean, one idea at one point was I was thinking make a separate zine of only injuries that would be sort of tipped into the book as a special feature. But then again, one of my big sort of wishes was to keep the book at a cost-effective price, because I knew that fans that my skateboard fans, I guess, essentially wouldn't want to be paying $80 for a book. We could keep it at 50, $55, around that zone. $60 was important to me. So I actually purposely cut some of the bells and whistles off the book just to make sure that it was accessible to more people. That was important to me, to keep it accessible. So we didn't do some of that stuff. So, when you go to the show, you get to see this huge kind of cluster of injury photos that were all together, which has an impact on itself, where you get to step into this world of how brutal skateboarding can be. Whereas in the book, the injuries are sort of sprinkled throughout. There's like a section of sort of injuries, but they're also kind of sprinkled throughout. That's one divergent thing for the show. But in a lot of ways, the stuff on the walls actually mirrors the book. I mean, there's kind of like a lust area. There's a friction with security guard sort of area, and those kind of themes that are in the book are translated into the show exactly.
I have to say, there are like so many great questions that have come in. There's so many great things from the chat. I think to the question of, can we try to save the chat? I think there's some sort of follow-up here where we may have to, do something and share it maybe with our PhotoBook Club subscribers, because there's just like literally too much to get through. So maybe let's
I have
zoom
time
out.
if you guys
Yeah,
do.
well, it's also YouTube likes things that, we're trying to think. But yes, I do want to ask you one more question, because I think there are a lot of young people tuning in, and I feel like one of the things that strikes me about you is like, it's hard for me talking to you now to picture the young you who for 4 years didn't pick up a camera while you're out there skating, like your rock star life back then. And so I think, do you have any advice for young people, like how to live a creative life, or, how to sort of, there's a real, a groundedness in the way you talk about this, a pragmatism even. And I'm just wondering, do you have any thoughts for young creatives listening, or selfishly old creatives too? I think I could learn a thing or two.
Well, yeah, I mean, the advice works for young people and old people. Jump in with 2 feet. I mean, that's all I really, it's the advice is kind of showing up is half the battle. Sometimes is just being there and start doing the work. Like I said, I didn't go to school. I wish I would have been able to go to school. I think people who get that experience get to be around like-minded people and go into like deep, intense talks about art. And I don't really have that in my world. I don't get to talk art with people. So when someone like Tom comes over to work with me on the book, I'd probably talk his ear off about art stuff and book stuff and the photo world, and like how I'm learning tons of stuff from him as I'm sitting over his shoulder, watching him do Photoshop work. I mean, I was really proud that when someone like Tom came to my house, that he didn't, like, I thought he was going to come in and say, we have to start over. Everything you did is just like terrible. But he was like, hey, all these are pretty good. Like, I don't have to do that much tweaking. So that told me that I like all the Photoshop work, and the way I've laid out books in the past hasn't been that bad. But in saying that, watching him take some of the images that I had got to a spot where I thought this was great, and he would just notice a little something, oh, this is a little blue over here. This is a little like, and then, doing things in Photoshop that I've never seen was mind blowing. And I'm trying to soak all this up as he's doing it and learn from him, because that's how I've learned everything, is just getting to watch someone else who knows how to do it better. And so that's, the advice is,
Yeah, I think I
you don't
love
need
it.
School's
And I think
great, but you don't need it. And if you start working on it and showing up, and that's how you meet people. You just start, you're there at the art shows, and 10 years go by and suddenly you've been doing it for 10 years, and hopefully someone notices.
And I think that's a lot of what we're trying to do here is like you do start noticing things, and it is fun to talk with people about this. I mean, I had never met Richard before I joined Aperture. I've learned so much. I love the production people that I've worked with in my life. They really do help you. And of course, all the artists. You can't. I had an intern this spring, and my closing word was like, hang around with artists because they see the world in ways that you never could unless you spend time with them. So just listen. So thank you. This was amazing. Thank you, Tom. I loved those production pictures from Prestone. That was really, I've never been. I hope to go. Maybe I'll go with you someday. Richard, you're an amazing colleague, champion of this and so many other projects for Aperture. Thank you. And most of all to you, Ed, this really is a book that is resonating with lots of people. We appreciate your restraint in helping us not add in a tucked in zine, but figure out a way to print it in so we can give it, make it more available. And I also just want to thank so many people who chimed in and wrote all those great questions. We're going to think of a way, Ed, I might just send them to you and ask, we'll figure out a way to answer more of them. We really appreciate everyone's enthusiasm. Thank you to Ruka for your support of the book, to FotoFocus, to our amazing internal team, Karina, for the stickers, to Brianna and Alex, to Clark and Candle Productions. I've loved working on this photo book club with all of you, and this has been a very special one. So thanks all. Wait, sorry. Wait. Yeah, thank you. I should say, if you want this book, you can get it for an extra big discount. It's in the chat. Maybe they'll put it in the chat one more time, but that's one of the perks of APBC wires with the code. You need the code. And then also remember that this and all of our other photo book club gatherings are available online on Aperture's YouTube channel. So I love it. Ed, you're the best. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Tom. Bye.